As we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this service is being held by a community that gathers on the stolen lands of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people. We pay respect to those Indigenous peoples who lost their lives in the colonization of this land, and recognize that these Indigenous tribes are still today facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon, the waters, the life-giving plants, and all the earth's creatures, as well as the winds, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize this is just a first step in moving toward right relationship with native peoples and healing of the earth. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the First Parish Church of Stow and Acton, FPC to our members and friends, a welcoming and spiritual community. My name is Anne Sadler and I serve as a lay minister. If this is your first time with us, we welcome you. Our minister and staff are listed on the front of the order of service. Please feel free to ask me or any of these people for more information about the church and its programs after the service or by email or through the chat if you're online. We also invite you to check out our webpage for news and information, and you can sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. We ask that people remain masked in our sanctuary except in the balcony and in church offices and RE spaces. But the rest of our building is mask optional. Please check with people you're talking to about their comfort levels, and please make sure the air filters are on when you congregate in any room. If you would like a large print order of service or hymnal or an assisted listening device, please ask our ushers. Our assisted listening devices are actually small radios that work throughout the building if you would prefer to listen to the service from another space. After this service, please join us for coffee and conversation in our fellowship hall, which is one level down at the other end of our building, or in a breakout room if you're joining us online. I'd like to draw your attention to the announcements in the order of service, and there's a lot of them, as well as information about how to sign up for our email list and newsletter. In particular, I want to mention a couple of things. There are still 84 gifts to be signed up for the gift drive. So if you haven't gotten around to that yet, please sign up. And if you need help signing up, please ask me or anybody else who can help you with that. After the service today, there is a potluck, and it will be followed by the annual Transgender Service of Remembrance at 1 o'clock. Everybody is invited to stay. And finally, there are several things that occur just once during the year, and I'm just going to list them. There is our pledge drive. There is Coffee House, which occurs 3 times, but there's one coming up. Poinsettias, which you can sign up to gift one for decorating the sanctuary at coffee hour today. Leaf raking, and the annual cookie swap. So please pay attention to those. And now let us come together for a time of community, singing, and worship.
As I invite Neil Saunders up here to give a testimonial, I also want to give a special welcome to any members of the Marlborough and Hudson Church that are joining us today. They've been invited to join us for the morning service and the afternoon service, and then we have several other congregations joining us this afternoon for the Transgender Day of Remembrance service as well. And it's a delight to be able to do things together in UU community. So come on up, Neil.
Good morning, everybody. I see from the order of service that I've been promoted to a lay minister, which I thought I left that to Ingrid.
We've absolutely been doing that a lot lately.
Okay, let me begin by thanking the Stewardship Committee for inviting me to speak in support of the current pledge drive, to talk about how important FPC has been to me and my family over the years, and picking up on this year's theme, to spotlight the many connections this has led us to make during that time. Ingrid and I first came to FPC back in 2001. We had previously been attending a Quaker meeting in West Concord, but unlike Baltimore, where we had been members of a large and very active Quaker meeting, there had only been a smattering of people every Sunday in Concord, and even fewer children. So we decided to do some church shopping. On that initial visit to FPC, we began by dropping off our 2 children in RE before going into the sanctuary. Well, we had barely got inside the door of Fellowship Hall before a bunch of kids came running up to Olivia and Graham, excited to see a couple of their Acton Boxborough schoolmates. Well, that sealed the deal. Although I do have to say that the welcome Ingrid and I received was pretty warm and welcoming too. And we've never looked back. So the first key connection we made at FPC was through our children. And we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the religious education program here at FPC. Not only did Graham and Olivia attend classes from 3rd grade until high school, but they also went through our whole lives and coming of age. Ingrid and I like to think that they benefited from having received a firm Quaker grounding, but we have no doubt that their ultimate shaping into the mature adults that they have become is in no small part due to the values and beliefs imbued in them here at FPC. I suspect many of you with children have had a similar experience. That connection alone is worthy of our financial support. Another connection that really reverberated with me during these past 20 plus years is the social action opportunities FPC has provided. Coming from a Quaker background with a long tradition of advocating for social justice, and a strong emphasis on the inherent worth and dignity of all individuals, what friends refer to as that of God in everyone, I have felt right at home here. Not only have I been able to indulge my passion for peace, but I've also seen a hearteningly steady increase in the number of social outreach activities taken up by members of this church. It is wonderful to see so much incredibly hard and valuable work being done by an ever-growing number of task forces dedicated to such a diverse group of social justice causes. Here too is a connection that is hugely worthy of our financial support. I also feel privileged to have served FPC in a variety of volunteer capacities, on the board, as president, and most recently as chair of the worship committee. Let's not forget that volunteers are the lifeblood of churches like ours. When it comes to stewardship, it's not just our financial support that enables FPC to continue to prosper, but it's also the countless hours that so many of you lovingly devote to making this church such a warm, friendly place, such a force for good, and such a spiritually uplifting community. There's probably no greater feeling of connection than being one of a great many cogs that together enable an infinitely larger wheel to keep turning. Finally, I have made a great many friends at FPC since coming to the church. These are the personal connections that have enriched my life and deepened my love for FPC. Just one small example is the FPC Brew Crew. What does it say about a church that encourages its parishioners to get together and enjoy a beer or 2, or maybe even 3? And would you believe that during one such beer drinking session a few years ago, several of us came up with the novel idea that maybe we might be able to raise funds for the church by holding a beer festival, at which even more people could gather together to celebrate the delight of God's own beverage. And so it came to pass. In all seriousness, I'd like to note that one of the prime benefits of what we can now refer to as the first annual Assabet Craft Beer and Food Truck Festival is the connections it can facilitate with so many people in Stowe, Acton, and other neighboring towns who have never set foot before on our church grounds. I'm sure that many of you can point to similar connections that keep you coming back to FPC. If so, I implore you to support everything that goes into establishing and maintaining those connections by being as generous as possible in pledging your support during this stewardship drive. Thank you.
These words are by Laura Bogle. We gather here to remember that this is our home, but not just ours. This land we live on, this water we drink, this air we breathe, these old mountains that hold us steady to our ground, these forests that give us their healing green, these flowers that give us their beauty and fragrance, these fields that give us our daily bread, these stars that show us our place. The wilderness and the tame backyards, all of it is our home. We remember the ancestors who have lived on this land and who have shaped it. The Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people, the settlers, the colonists, the farmers, the hunters, the immigrants, the artists, the families, the explorers, the business people, the engineers, the builders, the scientists, the teachers, the workers, the leaders. We inherit their choices. We honor the animals and creatures that have made their home in this land, the ones here now, the ones that used to be here. We envision the future generations who will live on this land and let their voices fill our hearts. We gather here to remember that this is our home, but not just ours. Amen. As I light our chalice, please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 349, We Gather Together, in your gray hymnals. And please join in our covenant and affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is an intergenerational service today, and so all of it is a message for all ages. But to share a particular story, I invite forward Ami.
This story is called Kipanamuk. Oh, yes, I can. This story is called Kipanamuk, and Kipanamuk is the Wampanoag word for harvest. It's written by Danielle Greendeer, as well as Anthony Perry and Alexis Bunton, and it's illustrated by Gary Meaches Sr. The story is a different format than a typical kid's story. This story starts with some children talking to their grandmother, Nokomis, and then transitions into a more traditional way of storytelling within Wampanoag community. So the grandmother, Nokomis, is sharing the story in the way that a traditional grandmother or an elder in the community might share a traditional story. The story is new, but the ideas in it are very, very old. Kipanamuk, Wiachaman's Thanksgiving story. Can you switch to the next slide? This story has some important vocabulary words, and some of them are from the Wampanoag language. So I'm going to go over a couple of them ahead of time, just so that it's not confusing. Kipanamuk is the time of harvest. Nasamp is a traditional Wampanoag dish. It's kind of like oatmeal. Nokomis is the word for grandmother. Usequimin Usamiquin is the leader of the Wampanoag community, also known as Massasoit. Succotash is a soup made from corn, beans, and squash. Tisquantum is a Wampanoag man, also known as Squanto. Turtle Island is a name used by many First Peoples in North America for the entire continent of North America. And it's based on traditional stories. Wampanoag is the First Peoples tribe. It means people of the first light. Wiachaman is corn, or the spirit of corn. And a witu is a traditional Wampanoag home. "I love your garden this time of year," said Maple. "Me too. What shall we pick for lunch?" Nokomis asked. "How about crab apples?" Maple suggested. "No, choke cherries," Quill shouted. "Those are both good medicine," Nokomis said. "How about some Wiachaman as well?" "Yes," Maple replied. "She is such a good big sister to beans and squash." "The three sisters. They grow together," Quill added. "You're right. They feed people all over Turtle Island," Nokomis said. "And they have many stories to tell." "Can you tell us a story?" Quill asked. "How about the time Wiachaman asked our Wampanoag ancestors to help the pilgrims?" Nokomis replied. "The first Thanksgiving?" Maple asked. "Some people call it that," Nokomis said. "We call it Kipunamuk, the time of harvest. And here's what really happened. One frosty fall morning, a long time ago, a large boat with white sails approached the shore. Seagulls circled above the boat, squawking, "New people are coming! New people are coming!" Hearing the news, Wiachaman stretched her weary ears toward the sky. "Who are these new people?" she asked. 2 winters had passed since many of the First Peoples who cared for Wiachaman passed on to the spirit world. Those who were not taken by sickness found new homes to ease their heavy hearts and rebuild their lives. Wiachaman feared this winter would be her last and called upon Fox for help. Fox looked up at Wiachaman. "Should we trust these newcomers?" he asked. "Stay close and watch what they do," Wiachaman told Fox. Fall turned to winter. Wiachaman and the other plants fell asleep. Fox watched the newcomers come ashore. He watched as they made their way into the forest. He watched them enter an abandoned witu. He watched them take a cooking pot and a basket of Wiachaman's seeds. "Don't take us away," the seeds cried. "We are waiting for the First Peoples to come back in the spring to prepare our beds. We must grow first." But the newcomers could not hear the seeds. Their ears did not know the voices of the land. Fox watched the newcomers build homes on top of an empty village. He watched as they searched for food, but they could never find enough to eat. Many of the newcomers lost mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters during the long, cold winter. The First Peoples watched as well. News traveled fast among the nearby tribes that the newcomers had arrived. Nobody was sure what to make of them. For many years, others had traveled across the sea to hunt, fish, and trade. Some were friendly, some were not. These new people seemed different. They were here to stay. Winter turned into spring. The sun warmed the earth. Newcomers continued their search for food. Weachaman awoke from her long slumber and thanked the Creator for another season. She and her sisters, Beans and Squash, pushed through the ground and reached toward the sky. Fox returned to share what he had seen. The newcomers are hungry, Fox told the three sisters. They took Weachaman's seeds, but they don't know how to help them grow. The other animals came to hear what Fox had to say. We should help, Weachaman said. I agree, Beans said. Our home is their home now. I think we should too, said Squash. People help us grow. We must help, Deer said. We agreed to feed the people. In return, they care for the home we share. I wouldn't, said Fox. The newcomers don't know our world. Sometimes new people can seem scary, Rabbit said. The Creator tells us to help all living things. This is how the world works. Yes, Duck and Turkey agreed. It's settled, said Weachaman. We will send the first peoples to help the newcomers. Over the next few nights, Weachaman sent dreams to the first peoples with a message. Bring me and my sisters to the newcomers. They are hungry and need help. The first peoples listened. Their leader, Osamequin, visited the newcomers. He could see that they wanted peace. Osamequin introduced the newcomers to Tisquantum. Spring turned into summer. Tisquantum showed the newcomers how to raise Weachaman and her sisters, Beans and Squash. He taught the newcomers how to feed fish and seaweed to Weachaman to help her grow. Soon Weachaman's seeds pushed through the earth and climbed toward the sky. Beans wrapped around Weachaman's strong stalks, and Squash stretched her vines across the ground, keeping Weachaman's bed cool and moist. Summer turned to fall. Weachaman brimmed with food, so did Beans and Squash. Weachaman smiled as the newcomers thanked Tisquantum and the first peoples for their help. Kipunamuk, the time of harvest, had come. The newcomers prepared a feast to celebrate the first year in their new home. They fired muskets in celebration. Boom, boom, boom. Osamequin, warriors, and other first peoples arrived. They feasted for 3 days. That meal changed both our lives and theirs forever. Many Americans call it a day of Thanksgiving. Many of our people call it a day of mourning. That's different from what we learned in school, said Maple. It was Weachaman and the other beings of the land and sea and sky who made the newcomers' first harvest possible? That's right, Nokomis said. This is why we pray before we eat. Well, what did the newcomers and the ancestors eat, Nokomis? Quill asked. Many things. Succotash, duck, turkey, rabbit, deer, lobster, fish, pumpkins, cranberries, boiled bread, and nasamp, Nokomis said. All this talk about food is making me hungry, Maple said. Let's go make some lunch then, Nokomis laughed. And we'll enjoy every bite, said Quill. There's a map here which will look a little familiar, where you can see the Wampanoag lands and Mashpee out on the Cape. This is where many of these first encounters with colonists happened. There's also some information about Wampanoag storytelling tradition and giving thanks in Wampanoag ways. But the most important piece that I want to mention here is that the fall harvest celebrates corn, but the Wampanoag people come together for many harvest feasts throughout the year, including Strawberry Thanksgiving, Herring Day, and Quahog Day. Many New England tribes think of the Thanksgiving holiday as a day of mourning because the settlers brought disease and warfare that continue to take the lives of many Indigenous people today. Each year they come together at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts to remember their ancestors who have passed on to the spirit world. Even today, the Wampanoag people and many other First Peoples fight for their rights as sovereign nations to practice their own traditions, make their own laws, and live on their homelands. And then the last piece that I want to point out, and I'm not sure I have a slide for this, but Maple and Quill are real people, and their Nokomis is too. I have met them. They are Daniel Greendeer's children, and they actually also have a baby sister now named Tulsi. So we are here. We are real. We are still here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ami. This is the time in our service when we want to share time for joys and sorrows, but I ask you to remember two things today as we do so. One is that this is a very full service with a lot of things still yet to come, and we are halfway through the hour. So if we could ask you to keep things brief today, that would be appreciated. The second is to remember that this is an intergenerational service, and that sometimes some tough subjects are not something that young ears are ready for, so to be judicious in your words. And with that being said, I'll light our first candle today for the incident that many of us heard about as we woke up and looked at the news this morning that happened in Colorado at Club Q, an LGBTQ nightclub, that we hold the families of those involved in our hearts and minds. Thank you. For all those joys and sorrows that remain in our hearts, let they too be lifted up in community, beloved community. And let's have a moment of silent prayer and meditation as we reflect on these that we have heard and those in our hearts. Blessed be, and amen. Please join now in our next hymn. This is one of the inserts in your order of service, number 14. We're calling it J14 because we're going to print up the Justice hymnals for you soon in your pews. And when we do that, the Justice Choir songbook, when we do that, we're going to give them all J numbers so that you can tell what numbers we're using when we put them on the board. We'll have to get some little J's to go up here too.
So we'll begin this hymn starting at the refrain at the bottom, and the choir will sing it first, and then we'll go back up to the top for the call and response.
Our voices are united, louder than hate.
frightened. We are frightened. We are angry. We are angry. We are rising. We are rising. We are hopeful. We are hopeful. We are peaceful. We are peaceful. We are striving. We are striving. Won't stop fighting. Won't stop fighting. Won't stop marching. Won't stop marching. Won't stop dreaming. Won't stop dreaming. Won't stop loving. Won't stop loving. And proclaiming. And proclaiming. And believing. And believing. Our voices are united. Louder than hate. We have gathered here. We've had all we can take. But time has come. You will hear our call. We're fighting for liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to invite forward Sharon Webb from our Racial Justice Task Force. And please turn in your orders of service to our land acknowledgement in there.
Good morning. As Cindy said, I'm Sharon Webb, and I'm privileged to be here as part of the Racial Justice Task Force. We are standing in solidarity as a task force with our need to have a land acknowledgement in this church. Indigenous issues are racial issues and justice are Indigenous issues as well. But we need to move beyond just having a land acknowledgement, right? Many of you know that the Racial Justice Task Force sponsors a monthly drop-in discussion, which is virtual, which is normally on the fourth Monday evenings of the month at 7 p.m. A week from tomorrow, on November 28th, we will have a drop-in discussion about the land acknowledgement and where do we go from here to deal with justice issues related to Indigenous peoples. So we'd love to have you join us. A Zoom link will be sent out sometime in the following week. In the Poetry and Spirituality group, we read the selected poem together, and then we call out certain words and phrases that mean something to us. So as we read the land acknowledgement responsively, I'd like to ask you, we won't call them out, but just think in your own mind what words and phrases ring true for you. Let us join together. We would like to acknowledge that the service is being held by a community that gathers on the stolen traditional lands of the Massachusetts, Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Wampanoag people. We pay respect to those Indigenous peoples who lost their lives in the colonization of this land and recognize that these Indigenous tribes are still today facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon, the waters, the life-giving plants, and all the earth's creatures, as well as the winds, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize this first step in moving toward right relationship with Native peoples and healing of the earth. Thank you.
And now Mary Evans, followed by Ami Ledwell from our land acknowledgement team.
Good morning. I'm going to start by reading from the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. I didn't know we had one. They have a land acknowledgement guide. Acknowledgement by itself is a small gesture. It becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationships and informed action. It is a step toward equitable relationship and reconciliation. Naming is an exercise in power. Who gets the right to name or be named? Whose stories are honored in a name? Whose are erased? A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. Many countries are far ahead of the US in adapting this project. Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, there are protocols, maps, and pronunciation guides readily available. Beginning in 2016, all Toronto public schools began opening their school day with a statement of acknowledgement. Why have a land acknowledgement? Offer recognition and respect, counter the doctrine of discovery with the true story of the people who are already here, create a broader public awareness of the history that has led to this movement, begin to repair relationships with Native communities and with the land, support larger truth-telling and reconciliation efforts, remind people that colonization is an ongoing process with Native lands still occupied due to deceptive and broken treaties and practices of eminent domain and other mechanisms intended to benefit government or corporate America. Take a cue from Indigenous protocols and open up spaces with reverence and respect, and inspire ongoing actions and relationships. Now, I want to take a minute to give sort of a timeline of events here at First Parish Church. We started having discussions in 2018 and 2019 about using the Friends Peace Team Toward Right Relationship Workshop. And in the winter and spring of 2020, we held a church-wide book group as a starting point, and we read the book, An Indigenous People's Histories of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. That book was actually the UUA Book of the Year. We learned of the rich history of varied peoples who lived across this continent in beautiful villages and the vast trade that was occurring across the Americas for hundreds and thousands of years. I learned that America's highways were the trade routes of the people of the Americas. Then in the fall of 2020, we held a 3-day workshop attended by 40 folks from our congregation and multiple congregants from many area churches. We held that with the Friends Peace Team entitled Toward Right Relationship. We learned more about the current movement of white and Native people to come together to correct injustices. We learned about the important step of reading a land acknowledgement before meetings, ceremonies, and services. One of the goals of the workshop was to take any funds generated and donate them to the United Native American Council at Devon's, Mass. Due to circumstances beyond our control, there was a delay in obtaining those funds. Brown paper bag tickets went bankrupt, and I need to thank Peter Fisk for his persistence. Just this month, we received those funds and passed them on to the United Native American Council. That was very exciting. In the winter of 2021, supported by Racial Justice Task Force, and a number of us met to create Your Land Acknowledgement. And we have been reading it before services, and some committees have chosen to read it as well since the summer of 2021. Ami Snyder Ledwell, as a member of the Wampanoag tribe and First Parish Church, led us in a service in August of this year entitled Why We Must Acknowledge the Land. She will speak of this in our next piece here. Thank you very much.
Waipoyak, Nitopawak, Natasuis Ami Ledwell. Welcome, friends. I am called Ami Ledwell. What follows are excerpts from my 2021 service about land acknowledgement. I am a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. My mother's maiden name, Paknet, is derived from the tribal name Pokanoket. But I also have German roots and Irish roots and Cape Verdean roots and roots I will never know in their entirety. I am a melting pot. I have a lot of privilege that comes from my fair skin, my education, my relative wealth. I live with a foot in this world and a foot in that world, and I'm still trying to find my place. In the search for my place, I read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. In it, she talks about what it is to be native, to be in right relation with the earth. And she doesn't necessarily mean to be indigenous to North America, but what it means to be named native to the earth. We are all native to the earth, and we must all take care of this earth. To become indigenous is to grow the circle of healing, connection to the place where you live, the land itself. It is what she calls the beauty of justice. Acknowledging the land we stand on is the literal least that we can do. Just acknowledging and apologizing for the past isn't enough. A good guest, when they have come for supper, doesn't just say thank you. They ask, how can I help? What can I bring? Let me lend a hand with the cleanup. I attended a webinar online entitled Beyond Land Acknowledgement. In it, the Native instructors said that every moment spent agonizing over the language of a land acknowledgement can be better spent actually helping Indigenous people today. They said there are 3 essential ways that non-natives can help. The first is to seek out and listen to Indigenous voices. Find out your local tribal associations and ask first how you can help them. No need to swoop in like a savior, just do what they ask you to do. Lift up their voices. Next is to put our own bodies and time on the front lines with Indigenous people. That means fighting alongside the water protectors, fighting for the earth. And finally is to put our money where our mouths are. Donate money, any money you can, to Native tribes in our area to help them fight for the earth and reclaim their sovereignty and land. We vote with our dollars. Support free tuition for Indigenous students. Hire Indigenous staff and employees. Money is power in this country, and when we have enough, we share it with others. In California's Humboldt County, they have something called an honor tax. The honor tax is a voluntary annual fee paid directly to the Wyatt Nation by people who are on their traditional territories. The amount is decided by the individual. People participate in the honor tax as a way of direct reparation to the Indigenous people on whose land they now live. They encourage those outside of Humboldt County to start similar donations in their own area. As you use, we are committed to 7 principles. The first of which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And the last of which is respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Acknowledging the land we stand on was stolen from its native people is one way of respecting that first principle. And going beyond land acknowledgement to action is one essential way to uphold the 7th. I hope that you will join me to go beyond land acknowledgement today and every day. Kutapatush. Thank you. As a postscript, I would like to invite you to 2 upcoming events. Today, there will be a vigil sponsored by NASJA, the Neshoba Area Social Justice Alliance, to highlight missing Indigenous women and siblings. The vigil is at 4 p.m. right here in front of FPC and the Randall Library. This Thursday, please join us here at Fellowship Hall for Native topics in film, music, and literature. An alternative to Thanksgiving that celebrates Native Americans and honors the National Day of Mourning. Drop in any time from noon to 7 p.m. Thanks very much.
Thanksgiving is always a difficult holiday for many Unitarian Universalists, I think, particularly here in this part of the country and in a standing order church founded by the Pilgrims such as this one. Many of us want to celebrate with our families and enjoy the traditions of our families, enjoy the traditions of our people, eat foods that are ritualistic and enjoyed and special to this time of year. And we are not here today to tell you not to do that. But I know that many of you, as much as you feel joy in Thanksgiving, also struggle with it. We know that this land is Native land, and the stories that we were raised with about Pilgrims and Native Americans feasting harmoniously together and starting a great friendship was not so much the case, as we systematically forced Native people off their lands through trickery, theft, and force, and much worse. So I know that many of you struggle with how to acknowledge that and yet celebrate as a family. So we wanted to have this Sunday before Thanksgiving lean into wrestling with this dichotomy and help with that struggle. We wanted to be a time to not just think about the past with happiness, nor just think about the past with mourning, to acknowledge that this is a time for the present and for thinking about the blessings brought to us by Native American peoples who also have traditions of gratitude and thanks, but also a time when we think about our future. What we can do as a community that mends the rifts in our land and our earth and our relationship with Native American peoples, at the same time as honoring and being true to the past. I've told you before about my own personal heritage, where my Landrum ancestors were part of the efforts to force the Creek Native Americans out of Georgia in the years that would lead up to the Trail of Tears. I've learned in recent years that the saying that I've heard my family use for promising that we'll do something sometime in the future, God willing and the creek don't rise, some people think might not just be about a creek, but about Native Americans rising up. God willing and the creek don't rise. While there is debate about this etymology, there are very real ways in which my family's heritage is tied to the colonization of this land, and that saying reminds me of it. Its effects flow through my generations like a creek. So this is a time of gratitude and a time of mourning, and it's appropriate for Thanksgiving to be a time for non-Native families to spend this time honoring this troubled past, acknowledging it, such as we do with our land acknowledgement, and also thinking about a means for justice, such as a land tax or land honorarium, as Ami spoke of. We're thinking about the next ways to do advocacy work, like the vigil this afternoon. So happy Thanksgiving, FPC community, but also thoughtful Thanksgiving, FPC community, caring Thanksgiving, gratitude-filled Thanksgiving, mourning Thanksgiving, and justice-seeking Thanksgiving. As I introduce our offering for today, I also want to let you know that this is the time when we launch our Guest at Your Table program. Information about it can be found in your orders of service. The idea is simple. You take a box, put it on your table for the next month or so, and every day you put money into it that would represent a guest at your table. And then you bring that back here the week before Thanksgiving or week before Christmas or Christmas Eve. In boxes or in envelopes, and we'll make sure your money gets to UUSC, where it will do things such as, I'll highlight one of the guests at your table is an organization that does leadership training for queer and gender non-conforming immigrants who are advocating for their rights here in the US. So that's just one of the many services that the UUSC is advocating for and supporting with your funds this year. So I hope you will join me in this traditional UU way to make this a season of gratitude and generosity and justice. And with gratitude and generosity, we will now gratefully receive the blessings of this congregation.
Slowly, slowly. the small land where great trees are spreading and upright, the blossoms of the living God. Patient as storms they tear after tear, our timber choir, south beams of holy waveless praise, the sound of blessing of whispers. Praise and give waiting all around, uprising ground, coming down the distant light, they are the island receiving sun and giving shade, their lives a benefaction made, and is a benediction said over the living land all their crimes and pleas believe. Cry now the wind, and we are pleased to walk on radiance of grace. All night come down to earth.
And now let me introduce Marissa Evans and our junior youth who will introduce our bread communion today. Or just Marissa Evans? Okay.
Yes, I would like to welcome up any junior youth to come on and join me. I know we have Robin, I see Graham. Come on up. So in our story today, we learned the Wampanoag word for corn, Wiachaman. Let's all say it together. Yeah, Wiachaman. And again, Wiachaman. So to honor this story and the first people of this land, the junior youth baked this cornbread for our ceremony of sharing bread together. The cornbread symbolizes nourishment, sustenance, and the spirit of generosity. As we all share in this cornbread, let it strengthen us in our commitments for living in right relationship with the earth, with Indigenous people, and with all people and beings. In this story, they say that they pray before they eat. I invited the junior youth to share some of their prayers or their hopes for more peace and justice in the world. One youth wrote, "I hope all people can learn to respect each other no matter who they are."
The sun, oh, okay, now it is. I am hopeful that at some point we may all live in peace together. There will be no racism, no sexism. It's all very... I have to say that this planet is really messed up, like, just in general. And I think that we should do something about it to make this world a better place for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. So, what are your prayers? Think of it now. It may be a wish that you have. It could be a prayer of gratitude, a thought about something that makes you happy. For the spread sharing ceremony, we made gluten-free cornbread and corn muffins that are both gluten-free and egg-free. So we'd now like to invite everyone to come on up and partake of the cornbread, starting with this side of the church and then walking back to your seat. And there are napkins, you can take a piece of cornbread, put your mask down to eat it, and then put your mask back on.
And I'm not sure if Marissa said this, but all the cornbread is gluten-free. Some of it is also, the muffins are also egg-free. And do we want to begin our hymn too as we do this? Or just wait? Yeah.
So the youth that made this cornbread were Robin, Graham, Devin, Liana, and Lenorzies, thank you, along with Mary Evans and Pam Cole.
Now that you all have dry mouths from this wonderful cornbread, and I have water, let's sing a song to close. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Let every good person have joined our song. We sing for justice. It's justice for everyone passing along. We sing for justice. We sing for peace. 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 We sing for justice. A friend on the left and a friend on the right. We sing for justice. In love and good fellowship, let us unite. We sing for justice. We sing for peace. 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 We sing for justice. And higher our circle can stand. We sing for justice. We sing for our neighbors in faraway lands. We sing for justice. We sing for peace. 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 We sing for justice.
Our words of benediction come from the UUSC's Guest at Your Table program. May our offerings remind us that our commitments and our actions are how we live out our Unitarian Universalism in this world. May we follow the leadership of those most impacted by injustice in making this world anew. And may this practice serve as an immense blessing that startles our spirits into remembering to hope anew.